and everything else.
Yeah, actually, I was born in Massachusetts.
Were you really?
And my dad, at that time, back in 1952, decided that they wanted to move to California because that was the land of opportunity, you know. And I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, and I was probably kind of not a wild kid, but I had my issues, you know, growing up, and my parents sent me off to military school, and I spent 4 years in military school.
Where was that?
It was a Spolvita Military Academy there in the San Fernando Valley.
Oh.
And so I was in the California Cadet Corps for like 4 years, and then I went back to public high school, and I went to San Fernando High School and graduated from there.
Was the boxing something to, as a youth, to get you in control, or?
Well, I always liked it. My dad enjoyed boxing, and I enjoyed baseball, and I kind of liked football, but baseball was kind of my love. And but I did some boxing, and there's kind of a funny story. One of they used to have a TV show called Kid Loves back in Los Angeles, a local TV show, and my dad took me there to audition, and the guy that ran it used to be Gene Fulmer. Remember Gene Fulmer? That used to be the middleweight champion of the world.
Yep.
It was his manager that was in. So I got in the ring against some other kids at my size, and I was a pretty good size at that time. And he said, "Nah," he says, you're too strong for those kids. So he says, "But I'll manage you." And I said, "I don't think so." I didn't want to become a prize fighter or anything. So anyhow, I grew up and went to high school, graduated from high school, San Fernando High School. And I tried 1 year of college. I wasn't ready, so I went into the Army.
And that was California Lutheran?
Well, no, I went to
Was that prior to
a junior college prior to that. For just a year, and I decided I wasn't ready for college yet, so I went into the Army, and I got out of the Army. I served as a reservist, and served I think 5 years as a reservist, but active duty for a little over 6 months.
This still in Los Angeles?
Still in Los Angeles, yeah.
And that's where you were in the reserves when we saw the picture from the 65 Watts?
Right, riots.
Underneath the Jeep there?
Yeah. And and that was an interesting a period of time. And that was the front page of the LA Times, that picture, and it was kind of interesting. So anyhow, I came out of that, and I had always wanted to be in law enforcement. I mean, since I was a kid, I don't know why.
Just out of curiosity, what did your father do?
My dad was a workaholic. He was a mailman during the day and worked full-time at night as a machinist. Oh. He worked for Lockheed and various other aerospace companies as a machinist. But he had 2 full-time jobs, and probably worked himself to death at a young age. So anyhow, I went to work for North American Aviation, and I had the opportunity to work on the Saturn project for about 2 years. And I think there's a picture on the website of
the battleship.
The battleship, yeah. That was the second stage of the Saturn rocket.
Yep.
And I was in charge of going up on that and making sure all the instruments were calibrated on the battleship. And
how often did you fire that?
Not very often. Probably in that 2 year period, probably 4 or 5 times. So, and
big noise.
Big noise, yeah. It used to shake the San Fernando Valley and Simi Valley, which is on the other side. It used to shake that whole area. And then I just decided that they were going to move that project to Huntsville, Alabama. And I really didn't want to move to Huntsville, so I decided to stay. And I applied to get into law enforcement. And I went to work as a deputy marshal for 11 years, and had a wonderful experience there. I had every prime job there was. I got to be the bodyguard for the presiding judge of all Los Angeles for about a year and a half. And I worked fugitives for about 7 years. And I was in charge, second in command of a small substation in the city of San Fernando. I got to do everything pretty well. And I was, by that time, I started back into college and went to college under what they call the LEAP program, Law Enforcement Educational Program. And that was a federal program that allowed police officers to go to school, and if you stayed for 2 years afterwards, they would pay the tuition for the previous 2 years.
Good deal.
And so I went all the way up through Cal Lutheran. I transferred over to Cal Lutheran. I got my bachelor's degree, and then I got my master's degree 2 years later. By the time I got my master's degree, I was married, had 2 little kids, and quite honestly at the time, I could see a big change in Los Angeles. And I did.
So we're in the early 70s now?
Yeah, we're in the early 70s, yeah. And it wasn't a good change. And so I decided, my wife and I, who was a native here of...
Linda is from here?
Linda's from here, yeah. She's a CSU grad.
Where did you meet her?
That's a funny story. I met her in a nightclub in Santa Monica. We were dancing on top of a table, and she caught me drinking out of her boyfriend's pitcher of beer. Is this edited?
It can be.
So no, I don't care. But anyhow, so anyhow, we got married in '69, and then we have 2 young girls, and I just didn't want to stick around in Los Angeles anymore. And I had been out here. We had been
But there was a
vacationing.
Colorado connection with Linda.
Yeah.
Had gone to CSU?
Yeah, she graduated from CSU, and she was hired right out of college. She was an auditor for the Defense Contract Audit Agency, and she was assigned to do Howard Hughes and Robert Mayhew's books for the Defense Contract Audit Agency back in the early 70s. And that was kind of interesting. And so anyhow, she worked for a few years, and we started having children, and so anyhow, and I had got my graduate degree, so we said, this is not the place we want to stay and raise our children, and so we moved back out here to Colorado.
What was your first job here?
Well, I was originally hired as an agent for the railroad, for Santa Fe Railroad, but the job wasn't coming open till October, so I moved out in May, and I went to work for Arapahoe County for like 4 or 5 months until this job came open, because they opened the job for me. And so I just worked as a deputy here at Arapahoe for like the 4 or 5 months. And then my job came open as a special agent for Santa Fe, and I worked for them for almost 5 years. Assigned, basically my area of assignment was basically from Denver down to almost Pueblo, and then out east to Kansas, basically.
What was your job? I know the title was special agent.
Special agent, basically, it's kind of a combination between a risk manager and a police detective. Mainly, I investigated crimes against the railroad and tried to find incidences of safety violations, that type of thing. And
I guess there were enough of those that was a full-time job.
Oh yeah,
in their territory.
Safety is a very big part of railroad operations, and they put a lot of money into that. And I really enjoyed the job. I really did. I had a wonderful experience with them. But as it is with any big company, and being a part of management, if they wanted you to move, they expected you to move. And I didn't want to move. So.
Did they ask you to move once?
No, but I was suspecting that they might. And because they had offered me a job in Chicago, and I turned it down. I said I didn't want to live in Chicago. So And so anyhow, I kind of saw the writing on the wall that they were going to eventually move me somewhere else. And and at that time, all the problems were happening in the sheriff's office here, and I got to know a lot of the deputies and a lot of people in law enforcement along the Front Range here. And they came to me and they said, "We don't like who's running for sheriff in Douglas County. Would you be interested in running?" So I did some research and I said, "Well, I'll try." And
Were you a Douglas County resident at that time?
yes, yeah. I had, while my house was being built in Surrey Ridge there, I was living over in Littleton. But by the time I ran for sheriff, yeah, I had been living in Douglas County for 4 years or something like that. And I had bought that property up there in Surrey Ridge as an investment. And then once we moved out here, we said, well, we like the area so much, let's build there. So that's really how that came into being. So anyhow, the sheriff's department was having all these problems, and so they convinced me to run, and I ran, and ran against a retired FBI agent, and beat him pretty substantially in the primary, and then in the general election, I really had no opponent. And so it went on from there. So I've been a pretty lucky guy, I have to say. Every position and every opportunity I've had has been a wonderful experience. So I've never had a job where it wasn't.
Well, I understand one of your first priorities as the new sheriff of a growing county was to see if you could solve the problem of the sheriff's office not having a place to train.
Right, that was
particularly firearms training.
Right.
You were at the Douglas County Fairgrounds at that point?
Yes, yeah, we were at the Douglas County Fairgrounds, just a couple hundred yards from Wilcox Street.
Well, I suspect that wasn't good.
Firing into a berm that ran alongside Wilcox.
Not good.
Not good, and very unsafe. And by my being exposed to some of the other sheriffs and police chiefs in the metro area here, nobody had a reasonable place to do any training.
What was Arapahoe doing at that point?
Arapahoe was shooting down in a gully right down here at the end of Broadway.
Yeah.
And they had no place to go. And every once in a while, Aurora PD had a small range that you could probably put 5 to 10 people on. And
These are outdoor ranges now?
And it was out at Lowry by the Lowry Air Base there. And but then you had to schedule it, and you had to make that long drive out there, and it really didn't kind of avail itself to the type of training that needed to be done. It was just basically shoot at a single target, do your shooting, and then leave. And so anyhow, it was a big issue for all, especially the agencies in the South Metro area. And so I kind of assigned my undersheriff to go out and try to find a place where we could build our own facility. And he did that, and it seems like every place that we found, somebody else had plans for, you know. And kind of a funny story, the last place was the old Arapahoe dump there at Colorado and 470. There used to be the old dump there. And we had told the commissioners that if they're going to take that out of service, why not give it to us and we could open a firearms facility out there. About a week later, I got this call from the former president of Mission Viejo, Jim Teffer, and he says, "I heard you want to build a range out on Colorado and 470. I says, "Yeah, we have it already designed." He says, "Well, we're going to build homes there." And I said, "Oh." And he said, "Give me 2 weeks." So I gave him 2 weeks, and he said, "Meet me down at where we are now, just about a mile and a half south of Titan Road. And he said, well, what do you think about this place? So him and Joe Blake and I and my undersheriff went out there. He says, we'll lease you this property for $1 a year for the next 99 years. And I said, you can't beat that. So
Yeah.
we said, we'll take it.
That was about the same time that Jim Tepper was growing tired of
Mission.
Lawrence Phipps's antics
Oh, yeah,
as the tenant on the ranch property.
right.
And eventually, he was telling the Arapahoe Hunt Club that they had to find another place.
Right.
At least according to what I remember Jim Tepper saying.
Yeah, it was.
He was growing tired of them. But
Right.
they had built, starting in '79,
Right.
as I understand it, stables for 50 horses and kennels for 100 English foxhounds.
Oh, yeah.
So there were structures there.
There were structures there, and there's
Yeah.
a kind of an interesting story on that too.
You want to tell it?
Yeah, back in, I can't remember the year now, but it might have been late 1980s, early 1990s. That big long barn that they had built wasn't built to code. Well, what happened was they had put the heating system up against the wood. Well, anyhow, it caught fire and it burned, and it caught fire and burned. And we had just received a donation of like 250 solid core doors for training purposes. And we were insured by Lloyd's of London for that property. And Lloyd said, well, we're going to write you a check for $180,000. And I said, okay. So we were able to build our first building.
And this was a solid metal structure.
Yeah,
building.
solid metal structure, yeah. So now it serves as our maintenance building and a storage building and an office for our facilities maintenance people. And so
There
anyhow.
have been many additions that have
Yeah, right.
occurred to that during your tenure
Quite
as sheriff and even afterwards.
Right, yeah. Later on, Mission sold out in 1992, I believe it was, to Shea Homes. And we had already put together a board and so forth, but we weren't incorporated yet. And the board was made up, I guess I should step back a little bit. When we originally got the property, it was only going to be for us. That's what Teffer wanted. And, but
And this
anyhow.
is 1983?
85.
85.
85, yeah. And Teffer only wanted it for us, and so did Joe Blake. But Arapahoe County Sheriff had a grant that had been sitting in the bank for several years to build a range, but they had no place to build it. And so I contacted the sheriff then, and we got together, and he said, well, if we can be part of your facility, we'll put the money in that to building the first range. So
And that was Dan Sullivan?
that was Pat Sullivan.
Pat Sullivan?
Yeah, and that was 1986. And so anyhow, we formed a board and primarily made up of Arapahoe employees, Douglas County employees, a member of Mission Viejo, which was Joe Blake, and a couple of citizens. And that went on for several years, and then we started to develop, and other agencies liked what we were doing. We had built a couple of more ranges and so forth, primarily with the use of prisoner help and donations and that type of stuff. And everybody liked what we were doing, and so people started saying, well, we would like to belong. So we decided we would open it up to other agencies because we had a lot of space. And have you ever been there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you know that most of the ranges are built in like fingers, you know, the kind of natural berms.
Yeah.
And so it
Facing-
lent itself to
facing
develop.
north.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Up toward Rocky Top.
yeah, and so anyhow, the bottom line was we said, well, we'll just start charging agencies per member, and that's the way we can create a budget and do future development and run the operations. So in 1992, like I say, Mission sold out to Shea Homes, and some of the same people stayed with Shea that were with Mission. And so that transition worked out real well for us because Shea came in and they became our partner, and they had the same attitude about law enforcement and supporting law enforcement. And it developed like that for many years, and today we have 64 member agencies that represent 2,900 officers that utilize the facility, and it's developed way beyond what we ever expected. We have the State Sheriff's Association is headquartered out there. We have those 64 agencies plus 8 ranges and our own maintenance building where we can fabricate and pretty much do anything. We have all kinds of digital training systems. We have the only what they call live fire shoot house pretty much in the state. And that's where the officers can go in with live rounds and shoot 360 degrees. And I mean, we continue to build and improve. We have a real state-of-the-art rappelling tower out there now, and so it's been quite an adventure, and it's been very well received by law enforcement, and even from time to time the military uses it. Mm-hmm. We have it's not been public yet. I mean, it's not a secret either, but it hasn't been public. But the military comes out every 2 years and does what they call Vital Connection. It's a military exercise that goes on for a week that everybody that is a first responder in the state and some from other states comes here, sets up their communications vans, and they try to talk to each other. And the whole idea is if there was ever a natural disaster or there was ever any type of need for military communications with local government or state government, they would be able to network immediately.
And you've actually tested it then?
And we tested there. We've already done it 3 times now over the history. And they also do what is kind of the state of the art today. They do a cyber attack response from a mobile location. They say it's easy to do it from Washington, D.C. or somewhere like, but if they ever had to do it from the field, it's a lot different. And so they do an exercise related to a cyber attack. And we just had it this last year in July. So anyhow, it's become kind of an international model. The Mexican government sent a delegation up here from the State Department.
Interesting.
Last year, and to look at our facility and learn about our training methods and that type of thing. So I'm very proud of that.
Yeah. And you've had involvement on that from the get-go.
From the very get-go, yeah. I'm one of the founders. I still
even after you were a sheriff.
Right. I'm still on the board of directors for the foundation, yeah.
Well, one of the latest things that I suspect you've had involvement with would be the emergency vehicles training facility that's kind of getting started in Douglas County thanks to a grant from the lineagers.
Right, absolutely.
Certainly you had a shovel at groundbreaking, so I assume you had something to do with that.
Yeah, actually we had originally designed a drive facility for our property out there at the range, but it was, the land didn't lend itself to a driving facility.
So it gets a little hilly there.
Yeah, and we had been looking around, and thanks to Holly and our present sheriff, Spurlock, we ended up finding a piece of property from that DuPont was trying to get rid of, and they ended up buying that piece of property, and I was asked to be on a research committee And we traveled all over the United States looking at best practices and other facilities and tried to take the best things from those facilities. We went to Washington State, Michigan, Texas, where else? We went somewhere else, and I can't even remember.
These are all places that have
Drive
tracks.
facilities.
That have tracks
yeah.
already.
And we put together a plan, and the commissioners at that time had just changed, and we were told that unless we came up with a significant portion of the money, we wouldn't be able to do the project, even though we already owned the land. And so Holly and Spurlock ended up getting with Dave Lininger and his group. And in fact, the now co-CEO
Of Remax.
of Remax used to work for me as a
Okay.
deputy.
Yeah.
He was a lieutenant for me as an investigator, so
Good.
Adam Contos. So he started
So
his
you
career.
just broke ground on that about a year ago. What's
Yes.
happened since then?
Well, we've developed a plan for the future, and we're starting.
You picked a contractor.
Yeah, it's built.
It's built.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
built. And if you want to tour someday, let me know, and
Yeah, I
I'll
think,
be happy to take you out there and look.
Yeah, Nancy Linsenbickler, of course, is responsible with the Historical Society here for
Okay.
tours. In fact, we've got a tour that she arranged with somebody of the Justice Center
Oh, okay.
coming up here just in
February
a couple weeks, isn't it?
February 8th.
Yeah. So yeah, we'd love to.
Okay.
Love to at least coordinate that. We think that would be of interest for our members.
Sure. Yeah, anytime you want to do that, just let me know. Just give me some
Okay.
lead time.
I'll give you a holler.
And it's a nice facility. It really has turned out very nice. In fact, we have a contract with Lockheed. They're doing their autonomous military vehicles, testing them out there at the facility. And we're making an arrangement with some of the car dealers and so forth. They're going to go out there and pay us to take pictures and put on, not racing, but just car shows and that type of thing.
Yeah.
Plus the agencies that are members of our foundation that do use the range have the ability to go out there and use the facility as well. So it's been a benefit to everything.
So the activity is picked up
Yeah, it's picked up, and
now
it's
that
going to be picked
now
up.
that it's built. And
Yes, yeah.
good. Well, it's kind of a secret for a lot of people in Douglas County who don't get out in that area of the county much.
You know, you'd have brought up the Justice Center. There's kind of a funny story on that too. I don't know if you're ready to go to that, but if you do, I think it's kind of a funny story.
Sure, go ahead.
Well, back in, gosh, I can't even remember it. It's one bad thing about getting older. You can't remember dates and things like that. But when I first stepped into being the sheriff, the first thing I knew was the facility that we were at was inadequate. And I don't know.
This was on Wilcox?
Yes, on Wilcox, on the very south end of Wilcox. And it was built in a floodplain.
Yeah.
And
Right by one of
you
those
might remember
gullies
all
there.
those stories.
Yeah, one of those gullies.
And I kind of went to battle with some of the commissioners at the time because they were sticking me with this facility that didn't meet any of the accreditation standards and so forth for facilities. It was totally inadequate for both the courts and for a jail and for our law enforcement needs. And so we kind of went to battle for a little bit. I mean, eventually I got pretty good support from the commissioners, and then we got sued for overcrowding back in, it must have been the beginning of the 90s, I think. And we were able to mitigate all the areas of the lawsuit except the overcrowding and the inadequate facility. And so anyhow, we ended up going to court, and I had to testify in court, federal court, in front of the Judge Maich. Do you remember Maich?
Mm-hmm.
Hardcore, very stern individual, was the presiding judge of the Denver District Courts, federal courts. And we had the county attorney sitting there representing the county, and then I had an attorney as well representing me because there was some conflict between the two of us. And then
You were the sheriff.
Right.
The county sheriff.
Right. And then there was the attorney for the federal government. And I had gone through all the steps that I had taken to bring to the attention of the commissioners the problems with the facility, the overcrowding issues and all that. And I'll remember this to this day. Judge Mage says, "Wait a minute, Sheriff. Here I'm testifying. I'm scared to death." And he says, "Wait a minute, Sheriff." He says, "I want you to know, I have no problem with sheriffs." He says, "I have problems with commissioners." And he looks right at the county attorney. I saw the county attorney's, I saw the blood in his neck turn red. And I said, "Oh, we're getting a new facility."
And is that how the Christensen Center for Justice got
Yes,
funded?
yeah, that's how it got started. And that's how it got off the ground and got started.
How long did it take to get that designed and built?
That was good. I took a whole team of people to back east, and we went to a program put on by the National Institute of Corrections. It's called PONY. It's Planning of New Institutions. And so we took several members from our department and the commissioner, a couple of the commissioners, and other citizens that were involved in kind of the politics of Douglas County. And we went through this program, and we went through the planning, and then we did an RFP for a design and so forth. And we ended up with HOK, which is a very top-notch architect. Matter of fact, they built
They did Coors Field.
Coors Field, right?
And the field in Baltimore.
Yes,
Yeah.
actually, you know a lot of stuff.
Well,
Huh?
just like you, I kind of like the Rockies
Yeah.
too.
So anyhow, HOK, Hellmuth, Obata, I can't even remember. But anyhow, Casaboom was the last one. But anyhow, they planned a very nice facility, very state-of-the-art, and we went out and held hearing after hearing after hearing with the public, and in that year, 1994, I think it was, we had an initiative put on the ballot by the commissioners for a sales tax to build a facility. And if you remember back in the history of that time, things were very, very tight economically. It was the only issue in the state that passed by such a high majority. So I was really happy about that. And so anyhow, we got off the road, we had a good plan, and we built the facility, at least the first phase of the facility. And in the meantime, the commissioner that was kind of the lead for the board passed away, and that was Robert Christensen. And so they named the facility after him.
I see.
So.
Wasn't named after Don.
No, not named after Don, who was a very good, wonderful undersheriff.
He was an undersheriff?
Yeah, Don Christensen?
Yeah.
Yeah, Don Christensen was my undersheriff.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was my undersheriff for the whole 20 years I was sheriff. And very, very capable guy.
So toward the end of your term, the new Justice Center got built. And come around your 20th anniversary, 2003, you weren't the sheriff anymore. How did that all,
Well,
how did that all shake out?
I got caught up in term limits. And they passed the term limits thing, and so I had 2 more times that I could run. And my last date basically was 2003. And quite honestly, I was about ready to say 20 years is enough anyhow. I had done a lot of things, and the department grew basically from 47 people to just 384, I think, is when I left. And we were, without bragging, we were the top, one of the top law enforcement agencies in the state. Everybody looked to us for leadership and for creativity and that type of thing. And so we had also started, I don't know if this is significant, one of the other projects I was kind of responsible for was developing a regional computer forensic center. And it was up at the, where that little substation used to be at Lincoln and Yosemite.
Mhm.
And we started that there, and it was up and running, and it was very successful. And then the FBI came along and kind of bought us out.
Yeah, that's where all the computer crime stuff, and
Right, yeah.
people looking for
Right.
pedophiles and
Right, and we
All
were
that
just
happens.
way ahead of the technology, and but you know, the FBI came along and they wanted to develop their own, and they didn't want to compete with us, so they basically bought us out. And the deputy director still is a member of the Douglas County Sheriff's Department, assigned to the FBI Regional Computer Lab. So that's why that position is always filled by one of us.
Let's go back a little bit in time. You started in '83 as the sheriff. Mission Viejo's first homeowners really only moved in the fall of '81. So there weren't many people out here at that point. 20 years later,
Oh,
the population was considerably larger. It's approaching 100,000 people now, almost at full build-out, 36 years later at this
Wow.
point. What type of challenges did you face, and how did you handle that with, as you said, the most rapidly growing county for 20 years running? Has
Well-
it impacted your department staff
Oh,
in
yeah.
providing
Yeah.
the services that supported your mission?
It impacted us greatly, obviously. We had to develop management practices that would reassign people to higher density areas. We had to cut response times, that type of thing. But I always had the I always had the philosophy that if you train your deputies well, they can handle more. And if you pay them well, they will stay here. And I tried to convince the commissioners of that. And we started to get some help. We started to bring the salaries up. We put a lot of money into training the people. And we started to get support. Once we got the support of the public, things went along real well. And part of that was here in Highlands Ranch, because a lot of the influx of people coming to Highlands Ranch were a little more educated, expecting a little bit more. We had a company here at that time, Mission Viejo, and then later Shea, that had a real interest in making sure that creating a community that didn't have adequate law enforcement didn't affect their ability to market their homes and their community. So we developed fast. We went from, like I say, 47 employees to 384 in 20 years. We went from deputies actually getting subsistence to, at that time, very well-paid deputies. And the educational level, I put educational levels on supervision and develop standards and policy manuals and so forth. None of that was there when I took office. There was nothing here. In fact, I remember the first time when I ran for sheriff.
Well, when you have 47 people, you don't
Yeah.
have the problems you have when you have 384.
Right. Walking, everything that was here at Highlands Ranch was really at the corner of Dad Clark and Broadway. And I remember
the first intersection.
There was probably, 50 homes here at the time when I was running. And I remember walking around the neighborhood and getting an idea what people expected. And of course, I came from an area where training was pretty important and well paid. We were well paid. So I never left to Los Angeles because I wasn't well paid. I left Los Angeles because I didn't like the change in California. But, so anyhow, things went along well, but like I say, after one term really, and people saw what I was doing, you wouldn't believe the people used to come to the commissioners' hearings and they said, "We don't care about all this other crap. Give us adequate law enforcement in our communities." And it went along very well.
When did you start building substations?
Oh, that was way later. That was, the first substation really was, we had one that really wasn't a substation. We had one up by the District 1, up by Deckers.
Oh, way up there.
Yeah, there's another funny story. Anyhow, we had that almost immediately because we had to do something to keep. How far back can I go? When I first became sheriff, we had a 82-year-old reserve deputy that the sheriff had given a gun to, and he was supposed to take care of the entire national forest up there, basically from the South Platte River and the Pike National Forest.
Sounds like a game warden.
And I told my undersheriff, go up there, and I said, we'll assign somebody up there full-time, and but go up and relieve this guy of his duties and so forth. And we went up there, and at that time it was tough up there. We had bikers and all kinds of things going on up there. A lot of the kids used to have kegers up there and cause all kinds of problems. And so I set Don up there and I said, go tell Ray that, it was, we appreciate his service and all that. But we're going to send somebody up there full time. And he went up there, and Ray was very understanding. He says, "Yeah," he says, "I'm getting a little too old for this." He was 82 years old.
82, yeah.
And so anyhow, Don says, "Okay, well, we appreciate it." And he said, "We'll get back to you. We'll get you some kind of a plaque or certificate for your time." And he starts to leave, and Ray says, "Well, do you want your gun back?"
Yeah.
This is hilarious. "Do you want your gun back?" And Don says, "We gave you a gun?" He says, "Oh yeah, the previous sheriff gave me a gun." Well, he hands the gun back to Don, and it was rusted shut.
Really?
It was a revolver, and it was rusted. And I'm thinking, oh my Lord, this poor guy's up here making traffic stops and running into bikers and stuff like that. If he ever had to use his gun, he'd have been killed.
Yeah.
But that was the prevailing attitude here when I took over. So anyhow, we had a small substation up there later on because we actually ended up assigning 2 people up there, and I convinced the new sheriff up there, Ron Beckham, when he came in 90, when did he come in? I can't remember when he came in, but anyhow, he came in right after Harold Bray, and he assigned somebody up there. So we built a little substation, and well, we didn't build it. It was a little building that we used as a substation. And so anyhow, there used to be a criminal up there that kind of had ended up killing about 5 people over a period of time. His name was Julian Gabriel. Do you know the story on Julian?
No.
Well, Julian had a place they used to call the Hideout, and all the criminals would go there, and it was right where you cross the bridge into Jefferson County. And he found out we built a substation. Well, he ended up setting it on fire because he didn't want a substation up there. So we ended up going up there and arresting him. And he got 40 years. He got 40 years on that. But we went in to his house to arrest him and so forth. And he had a dartboard on the wall with my picture in the middle, with a dart stuck right in my forehead. Yeah. And that kind of scares you when you know the guy's probably killed about 5 people. So anyhow, that was our first substation. And then we had other places where officers could go and write reports. But the first real one was right there at Lincoln and Yosemite. I promised that I would try to get something up in the northern part of the county
yeah.
because...
you ever do anything over in Parker?
No. no. Well, Parker at that time started to have their own police department back in '83, and no, we never.
That's good.
I don't even know if there's a need over there because really they can manage that by going over the roads and so forth.
Yeah.
And they have enough officers today where they're on the road pretty much all the time and cover pretty much all the districts. So.
Well, this Highlands Ranch has grown,
Oh,
including
yeah,
the central part and the west side.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a substation now in Highlands Ranch.
On my street.
Yeah.
I tried
Your
to get
street.
him.
You want to tell the story?
I tried to get him to put parking meters.
Teffer got a park named after him. You got a street named after you.
Yeah.
And Christensen got a justice center named after him.
Yeah. That was a surprise. I didn't know that they were.
When did that all happen?
Well, they ended up turning the building over there on Yosemite over to other branches of county government to build a station over here. And God, I don't even know how long it's been open now. What has it been?
I remember when
10 years maybe?
got built. Yeah.
10 years maybe, and but they surprised me. I didn't know they were going to name it after
Yeah,
me.
nice surprise.
I had no idea that they were.
They have a dedication?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's when I found out about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but that was nice of them. I appreciate that.
Sure. That's where Zach was headquartered, I guess.
The what?
I guess that's where
Zach. Zach.
Where
Yeah.
Zach was headquartered.
Yeah.
Night shift in that area, that would be obviously the closest responding place for
Right. Now I didn't know
Copper
Zach.
Canyon.
I didn't know Zach, but I
Yeah.
do know his father. So
You
yeah, his dad was a sheriff and had become
That's good.
sheriff while I was the.
It's
When I left sheriff, I became the deputy director for the post commission.
Well, Steve, you were term limited, and in
Yes.
2003, you had to leave, even though at the end of 20 years, that probably was a good breaking point anyway.
Correct.
What did you do at that point?
Actually, I rested for about 5 or 6 months and took a break. And then I was asked by the Attorney General if I would be interested in coming to work for the Post Commission, which is the Peace Officer Standards and Training Board, because I had been the longest serving member of law enforcement and served in that position. And I had started several different projects around training. And we had started a big statewide training program for police officers. He said, would you like to come and run that? And I said, sure. I said, only 2 conditions. One is I can only work 4 days a week. I said, I don't want to work more than 4 days a week. And 2, if you ask me a question, you're going to get the answer that I think is correct. And you're not going to get a political answer because I'm very outspoken. So anyhow, that was Ken Salazar, and he says, I can agree to that. And so anyhow, I ended up being the deputy director for the Post Commission and ran the statewide training programs, which is a bunch of dollars that come from your license plates. I think it's 50 cents now, it was a quarter at the time, went to train police officers statewide. So I helped set up that program. I served in that job for about 5 years, and then Dave Weaver, the sheriff here in Douglas County, I told him that I was about ready to leave the state. I said, I've had enough of state government. And so anyhow, he said, well, would you be willing to come out here and help run the training facility out here? And I said, sure. So I was serving the training program for a while, and then they actually moved me out to the training facility here in the Highlands Ranch area.
Where was your office when you worked for Post?
It was right there at the Attorney General's office.
Downtown?
Yeah, 2nd floor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had an office overlooking Colfax and what was the cross street? Lincoln? Something like that. Something like that, I know. But anyhow, I enjoyed the job, but I don't want to get into the politics of state government, but it's really, after being a sheriff and being able to get things accomplished. Working for state government was not my thing. Too bureaucratic, too demotivating, and really kind of stifled your creativity. And it's something I can't deal with.
So your next opportunity is to come back home and
come back home, yeah, and help them out down
What
here.
programs did you develop when they brought you back to do training?
Well, actually, I didn't develop the actual training programs. What I did was I was assigned out there at the facility to manage the budget for the foundation, to do long-range planning, to help facilitate the operations of the board of directors, and that was basically it. But I was only a part-time employee. I said I don't want to work full-time anymore, so I worked 2 10-hour days, and
This is 2008, 2009?
yes, 2008, and then I just retired again from that job this last October. And so I was out there for several years. But we added all kinds of digital systems out there for training. We added a big, it's like a half of auditorium and a half defensive tactics room for training officers, and it has digital firearms and classrooms. We added the live fire shoot house. We've added what they call a simulations training program out there. We developed a lot of the ranges, expanded them, and so forth. Then I worked with Dave McCaslin, who is the manager out there, and getting things done, and paved roads. All those roads were unpaved. I developed a program where they could get the roads paved for a reasonable amount of money, and all kinds of things.
On your watch, Ron King had his and his partner's unfortunate accident.
Yeah. When
did the road into the law enforcement training center get named the Ron King Trail?
It was, I'm guessing, it was right after I left. After they, when we started paving the road. After I left.
2003 or?
It was
later.
I believe it was around 2005 or something like that. After that was not a good time, believe me.
Yeah.
So. Ron King and I were he was not only my employee, but he was a pretty good friend. So.
Yeah.
And his wife, his fiance was my administrative assistant. So.
While you were the 20-year sheriff, any cases or incidents come to mind that were particularly notable that you'd like to talk about?
I don't want to really get into too many cases as such. We had a lot of them, and
or successes.
Yeah. I don't know if winning cases is a success. It's we did our job, and we did it pretty well. We did have one funny incident that we had talked about, and that is the clam bake. Maybe I ought to bring it up at this time.
What was the clam bake?
The clam bake was, in reality, an illegal gambling operation that was overlooked by a lot of political folks here in the state of Colorado, and a lot of well-to-do individuals that used to go up there in Indian Creek for approximately 3 or 4 days, and they would gamble, and they would fly in lobsters and clams from the East Coast, and they would have this big bake, and everybody would drink and have their fun and gamble, and strictly illegal. No licensing for alcohol, distributing alcohol. The gambling was illegal, and so we got wind of it, and at that time there was a lot of pressure on me to start enforcing some of these liquor laws, because we had a lot of teenage deaths and from keggers and things like that, and the people were really getting upset about the safety of the roads and the accidents and things like that, and they weren't happy about the illegal gambling. And So we ended up raiding it up there, and there turned out to be a lot of very influential people up there, and including the Justice of the Supreme Court. And he had been imbibing a little bit, and he told one of my lieutenants to sit down, and he said, I'm writing an injunction against this raid. And my lieutenant, quote, and I didn't find out till afterwards what he said. He says, I don't care who you are. He says, sit down and shut up. And every time after I ever saw this justice, he would always bring that up. He was always still mad about that. But it turned out that we seized a whole bunch of assets, proceeds from the gambling operation, and the alcohol was all determined to be illegal. And it was all turned over to us under asset forfeiture laws, because the actual persons running the various gambling tables all had convictions under RICO.
Swell.
And they were all organized crime figures that had been running the gambling operation. So anyhow, it turned out well for us, and the people took notice that we were going to put up with that stuff anymore.
Take it they didn't do a clam bake after that?
They did not ever do the clam bake after that. So.
Interesting.
But I thought it was a funny story when...
Yeah. Organized crime in Douglas County, has that been much of an issue?
No, we've had, well, only in that one instant did we have any really exposure to really organized crime. We've had a lot of incidences where we've met up with the right-wing type of extremists, the We the People group. They actually issued a warrant for my arrest to take me out to the public square and hang me one time,
You got to be important to be hung in effigy.
Yeah, well, they wanted to really hang me, I guess. But anyhow, but no, actually, once they knew that we were becoming a top-notch agency and that we were no nonsense, most of those people moved on.
Yeah.
You know, we have our strange ones pop up once in a while, but...
At one point, someone told me the story that they thought that historically Douglas County is where people doing bad things in Denver or Arapahoe came and just dumped bodies.
Yeah, that was us for
You were the repository when somebody needed to dump a body someplace. They would come to your county.
They would
maybe even prior to you being there, but.
And in fact, I live, like I say, up in Surrey Ridge there. One day on my way to work, before they developed that frontage road that goes on the east side of the highway now, it used to get on right there at Surrey Ridge. I was on my way to work, and I'm looking in the bar ditch was a body. So I discovered a body on my way to work where somebody had dumped the body. And eventually that led to the arrest of Vincent Groves, if you know who Vincent Groves was.
I don't.
He was a character in the Denver metropolitan area that was picking up prostitutes, killing them, and then dumping them in various areas of the thing. And it turned out that based on our body and the new science of DNA, he was the first person in Colorado to be convicted of murder for that case in Colorado.
Based on DNA,
yeah. Mm. And so that was kind of interesting. But for the sheriff to find the actual body on his way to work, his office job, was kind of an interesting thing. So. But I think any rural community that's next to, at that time we were pretty rural, that's next to a metropolitan area, you know, criminals tend to dump their evidence outside their city.
That's true. Well, Jim Tepper was the first Colorado project manager, if you will,
Right.
for Mission Viejo when they came out here in the late 70s. You started in 83 as the sheriff, and Tepper, I don't think, retired until the late 80s, early 90s at this point. Any interaction stories you'd like to tell with Jim? He was kind of a colorful guy.
Jim is a colorful guy and still a very good friend of mine, and we still have lunch occasionally, and he sends me his emails all the time, and I try to respond as caustically as possible. But yeah, there's a funny story about Jim and the impacts. He calls me up one day and he says, "Come down to my office." He says, "I have something for you." Well, when Mission had originally developed Highlands Ranch and presented the plans, they said that they would help with mitigating some of the impact of the community on Douglas County. And we were expecting things like patrol cars and things like that they would purchase for us and that type of thing. And I get to his office, and Joe Blake is snickering in the corner, and he said, "Well, we saw the kind of car you drove," which was an old beat up Ford LTD or something like that. It had like 250,000 miles on it. He says, "We bought you a brand new Cadillac." And I looked at him and I said, "You've got to be kidding." I said, "Are you trying to get me thrown out of office?" And they started laughing and laughing and laughing. And they finally said, "No, we actually bought you a patrol car," and it was a Ford Bronco. But they had their time of their life kidding me about buying me a brand new Cadillac to drive around in. And he still brings it up today.
Does he?
Yeah, he still brings it up today. So if you ever see him, tell him Zotos expects his Cadillac.
I will. I'll ask him about that.
And but anyhow, he was quite a character, but an extremely nice man. You couldn't ask for a better partner. Both him and Joe Blake, and like I say, Art Cook and Steve Armanson. Did you remember Steve? And all those
You worked
guys.
with Craig McCallum too. He was
Yes,
the
Craig
dedication
McCallum too.
picture
Yeah, he took over after
after Jim retired.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And McCallum was very supportive too. I don't even know. Does he still live here?
No.
McCallum? No. Okay. I haven't seen him for quite a while.
I think he has a son that does.
Oh, okay.
We did a Historical Society did a program out at Cheese Ranch
Oh,
this fall, last September, whatever. And he came and talked about when he was a 16-year-old kid, that his dad, Craig, would send him over there and say, "Hey, do this at the Cheese Ranch."
oh,
This was in the early 80s before
yeah.
Mission decided that it was
Yeah.
a vandalism site at that point, and that they ought to raise it. And they did. They got a lot of feedback, but
Oh, and after him was Bert Silva, when Shea bought out Mission.
Yeah.
Bert was a great guy too, and now he is the man for all of Shea. He lives out there in Newport Beach, California. And, yeah, he was a great guy too. So, if every developer could be like the people that were here, and some of the people over at the mobile company, the impacts on all government services would be a lot less.
it's good.
So I have nothing but admiration for you guys here.
You had much interaction over the years with the Metro District.
Actually, one of your Metro District people is sitting on our board now.
And who is that?
Renee Anderson.
Who?
Renee Anderson.
I don't know Renee.
She's on it's a Metro District board. She works with, is that the same one that Forrest Dykstra? You know Forrest?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Isn't that who?
Yeah, with that group.
Isn't that the Metro District?
It is.
Yeah, well, she's on that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
Any interaction with Terry Nolan?
yes, well, when I was sheriff.
I mean,
When I
Terry's
was
been
sheriff.
there gee, 20 years now.
Yeah, when I was sheriff, yes. Yeah, he was a good guy too. I always got along with him very well. And so, yeah, ex-Navy guy.
Oh, what?
He was an ex-Navy guy.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
aviator.
That's right.
I used to go, right up until a few years ago when everybody got so old, I used to go on a houseboat every year to Lake Powell with all naval aviators. You're talking about rowdy people. So I don't know if Terry was that way, but if he's anything like that.
Well, getting back to Teffer, whatever you talked about cars, you want to tell the story of fast cars donated to the county?
Fast cars? Are you talking about the ones? I don't remember anything about fast cars.
Your Facebook page has a picture of a car decorated with flames and everything else that might have been looked like a hot
That wasn't related to Teffer.
Mustang or something.
That wasn't related to Teffer. I can't remember who
No,
donated.
not Teffer. That's I'm on the liking fast cars track here.
Well, we tried to do a lot of things that would connect us with the youth of the community. Not only did we have other issues when I took the office of sheriff, but we had a very bad relationship with the youth of the community of Douglas County. So I started introduction of a lot of programs that were relating to kind of bridging that gap. One of my first acts was to develop the Explorer Post at the department.
The Scout program.
Right, and that was one of my first programs that I started, and it got to be quite a little group, and I got to serve on the National Law Enforcement Exploring Committee for about 7 or 8 years, and we put on programs all over the United States. But anyhow, the race car was, somebody came to me and said, we have a Camaro that's going to be given to us, and it needs work on the engine and so forth, and law enforcement had just started developing this Race-A-Cop program up there at Bandimere. And I said, well, let's do it. I said, if it isn't going to cost us a lot of money. So they got the kids at Douglas County High School to take it on as a project to rebuild the engine and that kind of thing in their shops, their shop program or whatever it is up there. And we got somebody to donate the paint job and that type of thing. And so it kind of grew from there. So we had that Race-A-Cop program from the early 90s, and I think it's still going today. I'm not sure. Cool. So yeah, so that was a fun project.
Was your 58 Impala your first car?
No, it was my second car.
Your second car?
My first car was a 1955 Pontiac Super Chief. My second car was the 58 Chevy Impala. Oh, you saw that on the website too. Then I had a 65 GTO, which I want you to know, in 1965 I bought that brand new, $3,600 out the door with every option, every racing option you could buy.
Yep.
And
that's the one they wrote the song about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I bought that brand new, $3,600. I remember how much. That was big money back in those days.
Yeah.
In '65. So, so I was kind of into racing. I used to do some drag racing and things like that in my younger days. And so.
In California?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't do it out here.
Yeah. Very good. Good. Paul, you have any questions you'd like to ask?
Yeah, yes. Did you ever have to make any trips up here to Highlands Ranch dealing with situations here, not necessarily at the mansion, but with problems here in this area?
You know, not so much myself. The department obviously did. You know, after pretty much my first term, well, I would go out periodically and ride with some of the deputies and some of the supervisors to see how things were going and so forth. Most of my time was spent with budgets, with dealing with commissioners, with dealing with training programs, that type of thing. So I really didn't get out myself a lot, except when I would ride along. Every once in a while I'd answer a call myself. I was pretty involved in that. The only time I remember really a big issue is we had a serious sexual assault issue up here at one time. And we had a community meeting over at the rec center, the Northridge Rec Center, where we gathered the community to kind of bring them up to date on the sexual assaults that were going on. It was around real estate, I believe it was around real estate. You might remember. I've been involved in so many different crimes over the years, it's hard to remember. But I think it was involved with somebody that was setting up, coming out and looking at houses, calling real estate agents. They would see their picture of a good-looking woman that was a real estate agent, and then they would sexually assault them. And that was going on pretty much in the South Metro area and in Highlands Ranch. And I remember we had a community meeting, but I participated in a lot of your activities up here, your 4th of July celebrations and things like that. And I have it's kind of a funny story too. One of the 4th of July, you know Vicki Starkey? You know Vicki? No, sure. Vicki called me up and Halflick. What was her name? She still works for Shea Homes, but she was Vicki and her were kind of the community organizers, you know, and they used to organize all the events. Well, you had just opened up Falcon Park there by the Highlands Ranch High School. And they said, we're having a big 4th of July celebration. Can you come over and be a judge of the various events down there? So I was a chili judge, and then I went over there and they had bicycles. The kids would decorate their bicycles. And they asked me to be a judge on that. And obviously I picked the wrong bicycle, because this one woman came up to me and she said, I don't want to say the words she used, but she called me a-hole and this and that for not picking your kid, and gave me the finger. And I was saying, holy crap. I said, I don't want to do this anymore. I said, I get enough about budget issues and crime issues. I don't need to be harassed over not picking the right design bicycle. So if that lady listens to this, I hope she is embarrassed.
So that's been a long time activity. The bike thing at the beginning of the parade, and
right.
that still continues to this day.
I got an award out here too. The Sweet 16 event. Were you around when they had the Sweet 16 event over there at the big park? What's the big park by the post office?
Heritage.
Heritage, yeah. They had a big event there one time, and they gave me a big award for being one of the 16 most influential people in Highlands Ranch, and I was really proud of that. So anyhow, that was fun too. So.
Yeah.
You had much dealings with the school district over the years?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I watched that school district
when
grow.
Rick was the superintendent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There was only one high school in the whole county when I became sheriff. They had just started.
That was Highlands Ranch.
No, that was
Douglas
County. Yeah, and then they built Ponderosa and then Highlands Ranch. Yeah. But yeah, we did a lot with the school districts. We started the school resource officer program that still exists today. Sure. I started all that and worked with them closely on every issue. I used to even personally go out and help them do security on the football games and those kinds of things, and always enjoyed that. I have an interesting story about one of my daughters.
Mm-hmm. Which one?
Stacy. Stacy was a big softball athlete and all that. And I think she still holds the batting average title for.
She go to Highlands Ranch, or?
She went to Douglas County.
Douglas County. Yeah.
She lives here in Highlands Ranch, but she lives right off of Veniford there. But at that time, they had just dissolved county's involvement in recreational programs And they wanted the softball people and the baseball people all to get together and develop their own boards and run them independently. And so I ended up getting on that board. And they actually, this is the theory of, it's kind of apropos to what's going on today. They wanted the girls to go out and solicit money so the boys could have uniforms.
Ooh.
And I said, that is not going to happen. But kind of getting to the school thing. Well, my daughter, when she got into high school, she was a pretty good athlete and a hell of a batter. And Douglas County didn't want to start a girls softball team because they would have to pay for it. And I went and made a presentation before the commission, the board of directors, or whatever they call themselves, and they didn't want to fund. So we ended up having to put together people that would help fund the Douglas County High School softball team rather than the district doing it. And I was a little mad about that for a while, but it ended up that they ended up having to do it because of what was the federal proposition?
Title IX.
As a Title IX.
Yeah.
They ended up having to do some of that, and now they have a pretty good team. But in those days, and we had a pretty good softball team for only 1 year.
Douglas County's always had
Yeah.
good teams.
Mr. Bonaquista, he was the baseball coach. He did it for nothing, and
Yeah.
and she got a couple of scholarships, but she never took them. She ended up
My
getting
step-
an academic.
My stepdaughter played softball for,
Oh, really?
for Highlands Ranch.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's a
She
great
was a
sport.
pitcher.
Yeah. Yeah, my daughter was shortstop.
All the activities, though, seem to be at the club level, really.
Yeah.
The high school season was so short by comparison.
Yeah.
That most of the activity that if you were a parent, you spent a lot of time and money in the off-season.
Yeah.
That's where the learning went on.
Her daughter's a hell of an athlete now. She just won last night against 429 participants. She won the Excel Invitational for gymnastics up in Wheat Ridge, and she came in first among all the girls from 6 to 18. And she won the state championship last year, and then she was invited. She's going to Orlando in a couple of weeks for a big national competition down there. So
Yeah.
she's quite a little girl. Hayden Seymour, if you ever want to look her up. So,
Something else I was going to ask you about here too. You've done a lot of progressive things for the police department here. Is that come about by your past experience, or has it been brought about by thinking outside the box?
Oh, a little of both. Like I say, I came from one of the biggest agencies in the United States in Los Angeles County, and they put a lot of emphasis on education. They put a lot of emphasis on training and so forth. So I already had that mindset when I came here. And then my exposure to the railroad did the same thing. They put a lot of money, they put a lot of emphasis on motivation, problem solving, those types of things. And I brought all that to the sheriff's department. But you have to realize how bad things were when I took office. It was very easy to improve. It was really sad because they had a lot of very good people, and they just were demotivated, and they had no leadership. They were demoralized by the constant investigations, and they were embarrassed by some of their own people that had gotten in trouble. But if you really, I mean, this is my philosophy, my personal philosophy. If you train somebody well, and you pay them well, and you provide opportunities to get better, that's a hell of a lot more of a way to be fiscally sound in providing services.
You'll have
to
better
government.
retention.
Right, absolutely. My last 10 years of being sheriff, my turnover in the commission ranks, that's deputy and above, was 1%.
Well, that's nothing.
That's nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
1%.
Yeah, we're doing a lot of things right.
Yeah. People loved it there.
Well, I'll give you the final word. Are there any other things you'd like to tell us on this before we wrap up?
No, I just hope that this isn't given over to a special prosecutor or anything, and that, and that I mean, there are so many stories, it's hard to get them all out, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. I'm very proud of what I did, and I'm proud of how our people have progressed over the years, and every once in a while in the paper they say Zotos started a dynasty, and that's not so true. I mean, the people that have become sheriff and have advanced through the ranks, while most of them started with me, I'm proud of most of those people. They have progressed well. They're doing a lot of the things that I think need to be done, and so I'm very happy. I've had a hell of a life.
I think a testament to your leadership even after that is just look at the support recently here with the funeral for Zach.
Yeah, they did a wonderful job on that. Yeah. I was sick that day.
That's community support was
Right.
just
Outstanding.
outstanding. You know, just
Absolutely.
way over the top.
Yeah.
You know, far more than I think most people would have expected.
Right. And you know, I always used to tell developers and so forth that there's nothing worse for your selling your community than to have problems with crime, you know. So we're an important part of marketing your community,
Oh, absolutely.
you know, and and I think they understood that.
Yeah,
I mean,
Highlands Ranch was promoted as a safe neighborhood,
absolutely.
a safe family-oriented neighborhood.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the rest of the county primarily
Yeah.
is as well. I mean, this isn't just Highlands Ranch. It's a very safe community. Things are changing as we urbanize, but some of that you can't have that much. So.
Okay, well, on behalf of the Historical Society, thanks again for
Oh, well, thank you.
sharing your thoughts with us today.
I appreciate it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I hope I didn't talk too long.